what's up everyone? Welcome back to the channel, and today we've got something super exciting for all you tower defense fans out there. We're diving into Five Nights Tower Defense, yes, that FNAF game, but this time you're defending your base with all your favorite creepy animatronics. Now, if you want to dominate the leaderboard and leave those pesky enemies trembling, choosing the right animatronics for your squad is key. But don't worry, I've got you covered with the ultimate tier list, so you'll know exactly who to trust on the battlefield. In this video, we'll break down the best and worst animatronics you should be using. Because let's be real, not all of them are created equal. Some of them are absolute beasts, while others, let's just say they belong back in the storage closet. So grab your Faz coffee and get ready, because we're about to rank these spooky characters and help you build the ultimate defense lineup. Let's get into it. I'm quickly moving on to the video, and I'm ranking units in Five Nights Tower Defense. Before we start, if you enjoy these types of list videos, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Enjoy watching. First, let's start with the best units for the early game. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Toy Bonnie, Toy Freddy, Summer Toy Bonnie, and Foxy. Alright, let's talk about some of the not-so-great starter units in Five Nights TD. Yes, I'm looking at you, D tier. First up, we have Toy Bonnie, and honestly, I don't even know where to begin with this one. It's like all of Toy Bonnie's stats decided to take a day off. Out of all the epic units, this one's gotta be the worst. It's so underwhelming that if you're still using Toy Bonnie, maybe it's time to reconsider some life choices. Then there's Toy Freddy. And wow, Toy Freddy really brings nothing to the table. The range is laughable, and the DPS, just 20 when you first place him. I mean, I'm not saying you should avoid Toy Freddy like the plague, but yeah, maybe do that. He's not going to be your go-to when things get intense in the later stages. You could do better by picking almost any other unit. And don't even get me started on Summer Toy Bonnie. Sure, she can slow enemies down, but that doesn't really save her from being just bad. I'd rather have a regular starter unit over Summer Toy Bonnie any day. As for Foxy, melee in a TD game? Come on, who thought that was a good idea? He rushes into the fight, but in this kind of game, that's just asking for trouble. If you've got Foxy in your lineup, do yourself a favor and swap him out. Trust me. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Baker Toy Chica, Party Chica, Withered Chica, Sniper Cupcake, and Chica. Let's talk about some of the C-tier starter units in Five Nights Tower Defense, specifically the Chica Squad. Now, don't get me wrong, these units can be helpful if you're just starting out, but let's just say you'll probably outgrow them pretty fast. First up is Baker Toy Chica, who brings some explosion damage to the table. She's decent for beginners, especially when you're swarmed by weaker enemies, but honestly, you'll quickly find better units to rely on. She's like that old car you used to have, great at first, but once you've upgraded, you're never looking back. Then there's Party Chica, and oh boy, where do I begin? I guess her only saving grace is her splash damage, which can be useful for hitting multiple targets, but beyond that, she's kinda trash. Her stats are so bad that you'll wonder if she was just there for the party hats. Seriously, use her only if you're desperate, or if you just like Chica's design because, well, she's not bringing much else to the battlefield. Moving on to Sniper Cupcake. This one's a bit interesting. The range is insane, and that's what makes it a C-tier unit instead of being totally forgettable. You can place it far away, picking off enemies from a distance. But here's the catch. You can only place 3 of them, and their DPS isn't exactly something to write home about. So, while it's fun watching Cupcakes snipe enemies from afar, you'll probably switch to something with a bit more firepower as soon as you get the chance. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Rockin' Bonnie, Pirate Withered Foxy, Vendor Toy Chica, Buccaneer Foxy, Major Freddy, and Freddy. Alright, let's dive into some of the B-tier starter units in Five Nights Tower Defense. Now, these guys are pretty solid for getting you through those early waves, but they aren't the best of the best. Still, if you're just starting out, these characters can really help you hold your own. Let's kick it off with Rockin' Bonnie. Sounds cool, right? She's got that full AoE, which looks amazing on paper. But when you actually use her, you'll realize that there are just better options out there. Like, yeah, she can handle groups, but if you're looking for a top-notch starter, you might want to keep looking. Now, Pirate Withered Foxy, he's like the cool cousin of Major Freddy. He's decent, but his DPS? Meh, not the most impressive. He's a good early game option if you don't have anyone better, but you'll likely be swapping him out as you progress. Oh, and let's not forget Vendor Toy Chica. She's kinda like a weaker version of Patriot Freddy, Still, she can definitely pull her weight in the early waves, but don't expect her to carry you all the way. She's more of a get in, do your job, then step aside kind of unit. Then, we've got Buccaneer Foxy, and let me tell you, this guy's got potential. He's like the new and improved Freddy, with better damage, range, and cooldowns. Plus, you can place 4 of them. Speaking of Freddy, Major Freddy is pretty solid too. His single target DPS is great for picking off those pesky enemies one by one. And last but not least, there's regular Freddy, the OG. He's not amazing, but he's far from bad. He's cheap to upgrade, and you can place a bunch of him, which makes him a decent choice when you're just getting started. So yeah, B tier, but not bad at all. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Phantom Cupcake, Patriot Freddy, Endo02, Commando Endo, Rad Freddy, Nightmare Freddy, Funtime Foxy, and Cowboy Freddy. Alright, let's dive into the A-tier starter units for Five Nights Tower Defense, because trust me, these guys are the ones you want on your team early game. First up, we've got Phantom Cupcake. I mean, come on, this little guy has some serious bite. Out of all the starter units, he's rocking one of the highest DPS stats, so if you're looking to melt those enemy waves fast, Phantom Cupcake is your go-to. Super solid, and honestly, it's hard to beat that consistent damage output right out of the gate. Now, Patriot Freddy, what a beast for early game explosions. He's cheap, effective, and absolutely crushes big waves. If you're trying to hold off an overwhelming number of enemies, he's a no-brainer to drop in. And for those of you who like that tactical approach, Endo02 is a pretty solid single target damage dealer with good range, though spoiler alert, Phantom Foxy kind of edges him out later. Still, you won't regret rolling with him early on. Speaking of surprises, Commando Endo may not seem impressive at first glance with his subpar DPS, but don't sleep on him. His summons? Yeah, they bring the heat. Attacking and dealing reasonable damage that can turn the tide in certain stages. Combine him with Rad Freddy, who's basically a supercharged sniper cupcake with double the DPS, and you're looking at an unstoppable early game setup. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Elizabeth, Freddle, Witch Toy Chica, Tavern Chica, Bonnet, and Phantom Foxy. Alright, let's dive into some of the best S-tier starter units in Five Nights Tower Defense. First up, we have Elizabeth. Now, if you're looking for a splash slow unit with some serious damage output, Elizabeth is your girl. She not only dishes out amazing DPS, but also boasts solid range. The cherry on top? Her upgrades are super cheap, so you can pump her up without breaking the bank. She's definitely a game changer, especially when you're just starting out. Next, let's talk about Freddle. While he might not be a top-tier starter, he's definitely better than Commando Endo. The catch? His cooldown is a bit on the high side, which can be a bummer in fast-paced situations. But if you manage your placements well, he can still be a valuable addition to your roster. On the other hand, if you're looking for something a little more reliable, Witch Toy Chica is one of the best starters you can get. She's super affordable and can handle both bosses and mobs like a pro, making her a must-have for your early game strategies. And we can't forget about Tavern Chica. This unit is pretty OP for a starter with fantastic damage, range, and a wide AoE splash attack. Seriously, she'll clear those pesky mobs in no time. Bonnet is another fantastic option. This splash unit comes with impressive range and DPS, and he's extremely cheap to place and upgrade. Lastly, we have Phantom Foxy. He's a solid choice as a cheap 4-placement single-target DPS. He really shines in the early game when you need reliable damage output. So there you have it. These S-tier starters are not just fun to use, but also incredibly effective. Happy defending! The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Fortified Endo02, Phone Guy, Purple Guy, Tarnished Spring Bonnie, and Jackpot Freddy. Alright folks, let's dive into the exciting world of Five Nights Tower Defense and talk about some absolute powerhouses from the S+ tier starter units. These characters are not just good, they're game changers. First up, we have the Fortified Endo02. This little guy might come with a hefty price tag in terms of resources, but let me tell you, his damage per second DPS is off the charts. Just imagine pouring those resources into him, but be careful. Sometimes investing in other evolutions might yield better results. Still, if you want a strong DPS unit, you can't go wrong here. Next on our list is the ever-reliable Phone Guy. He's not just another pretty face. He's got full area of effect, AoE capabilities with fantastic DPS and range. The real kicker? He slows down enemies, making him a fantastic alternative to the Crying Child, even in the late game. Pair him up with some solid support, and you've got a recipe for disaster for your foes. If you're looking for consistent crowd control, this guy is definitely your go-to. And how could we forget about Purple Guy? This unit is a total gem among the new starters. He spawns turrets that boast insane range and damage, making him a formidable ally on the battlefield. Then there's Tarnished Spring Bonnie, who might be a melee character, but don't let that fool you. Her damage and range are downright terrifying. Just a heads up though, acquiring her is a bit trickier than snagging Patriot Freddy or Witch Toy Chica. Last but not least, we have Jackpot Freddy. Not only does he deal solid damage, but he also generates money for you. However, if you want to maximize his potential, you'll need something to extend his range. So, whether you're in it for the damage or the cash flow, these S+ tier starters are sure to elevate your game. Now it's time for the best units for mid-game. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Cupcake Tank, Balloon Boy, Golden Freddy, Nightmare Chica, and Toy Chica. Alright, let's dive into the not-so-great side of the Five Nights Tower Defense universe with some D-tier units. First up, we have the Cupcake Tank. Honestly, this little guy does absolutely nothing. Its summons are so irrelevant that I felt the need to give it its own tier. Yes, it's that bad. You'd think a cupcake could at least distract the enemies, but nope. It's just sitting there looking cute while your defenses crumble. Next on the list is Balloon Boy. Now, if you've ever played with Toy Chica, you might think Balloon Boy is a better option. But let me tell you, he comes with a price tag that's 4 times higher. Seriously, why would you spend all that for a unit that's arguably one of the worst in the game? He's definitely not worth the investment if you're trying to keep your towers up and running during the mid-game. Then we have Golden Freddy and Nightmare Chica. Golden Freddy suffers from ridiculously low DPS paired with a high cost, making him a complete waste of resources. On the other hand, Nightmare Chica has a high price too, but her range and DPS are just low enough to land her slightly above Golden Freddy. Still, that's not saying much. And don't even get me started on Toy Chica. With her lackluster range and total DPS, she's definitely among the worst units you can field. So, if you're looking to build a solid mid-game strategy, I recommend steering clear of these guys. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, 7C's Foxy, Bonnie, Nightmare Balloon Boy, Coco Boy, Nightmare Cupcake, and Withered Foxy. Alright, let's dive into the C-tier units of Five Nights Tower Defense. First up, we've got 7C's Foxy. Now, don't let the name fool you. He's like a budget version of Leviathan Mangle. Sure, he boasts a longer range, making him decent for dealing with mobs in the mid-game, but if you're looking for raw power, you might want to keep searching. Still, he can be a handy backup when you need to hold the line a bit longer. Next on our list is Bonnie. Honestly, Bonnie feels like a bit of a letdown. He's got higher range than Withered Freddy, but lacks the DPS to really make a difference. Plus, his placement and upgrade costs are higher, which just makes you wonder if he's really worth the investment. It's like, hey, I could have just grabbed something else that's actually useful. So, if you've got better options, Bonnie might not be your best bet. Now, let's talk about Nightmare Balloon Boy and Coco Boy. Nightmare Balloon Boy is pretty underwhelming for a mythic unit. He has Pierce, which is nice, but with such low DPS and range, he's not exactly a game changer. Coco Boy is a step up, but just barely. That explosion radius helps him stand out a bit, but it's not enough to make him a go-to choice. Finally, we have Nightmare Cupcake, a single target DPS that just can't keep up with the competition. And let's not forget Withered Foxy, who used to rule the roost but has fallen behind the stronger mid-game units. So, while these C-tier units might have their moments, it's safe to say you can find much better options as you progress. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Algae Fredbear, Withered Freddy, Mercenary Foxy, Nightmare Foxy, Artillery Puppet, Hooligan Toy Bonnie, and Glitched Cupcake. Alright, let's dive into the B-tier mid-game units of Five Nights Tower Defense. First up, we have Algae Fredbear. Now, this guy is like the budget version of Withered Golden Freddy, but don't let that fool you. With a max placement of just 3, he might seem limited, but he packs a punch that can surprise your enemies. He's reliable enough to hold the fort when you're transitioning into those tougher stages of the game. Plus, who doesn't love a little algae flair, right? Next on the list is Withered Freddy. This continuous unit boasts solid DPS, which is always a plus in any tower defense game. However, let's talk about those upgrade costs for a moment. They can get pretty steep. While he does provide some decent damage output, there are definitely better options out there that won't drain your resources as quickly. If you're looking for a reliable option without breaking the bank, you might want to consider other mid-game choices. Now, if you want a unit that's both cheap to place and upgrade, then Mercenary Foxy is your guy. With the ability to place 4 of him at once, he compensates for his lower base damage nicely. It's all about strategy, and having multiple Mercenary Foxies can really spread the damage around. Then we have Nightmare Foxy, who brings a nice mix of decent damage with a shorter cooldown and longer range. Just watch out for his smaller AoE. Lastly, there's Artillery Puppet, a long-range explosion unit with high base damage, but boy, that cooldown can be a real pain. If you're running low on AoE options, he might just be your saving grace. So, while these B-tier units might not be the absolute best, they definitely have their moments in the spotlight. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Slick Bonnie, Nightmare Fredbear, Sentinel Bonnie, Rocketeer Mangle, Withered Golden Freddy, Phantom Golden Freddy, and Endo 03. Alright folks, let's dive into the A-tier units of Five Nights Tower Defense, particularly those shining in the mid-game. First up, we have Slick Bonnie. Now, think of Slick Bonnie as a slightly toned-down version of Bounty Mangle. Sure, it has lower cost, range, and DPS, but don't let that fool you. It's still a solid option for holding your ground during those mid-game battles. You'll find that it packs quite the punch without breaking the bank. Next, let's talk about Nightmare Fredbear. This guy is a reliable choice in the mid-game scene, but here's the catch. With heavy hitters like War Machine Foxy around, he can feel a bit overshadowed. Still, if you're strategizing and need something dependable, he's got your back. And then we have Sentinel Bonnie, another worthy contender. Picture him as the budget-friendly version of War Machine Foxy. He may not be as flashy, but for those mid-game encounters, he definitely holds his own. Now, let's not forget about some of the explosive units. Rocketeer Mangle boasts one of the best DPS among explosion units, but its low range might keep it from reaching the top tier. And we can't overlook Withered Golden Freddy. He might even outshine Sentinel Bonnie due to his higher placement count, leading to a total DPS that can be quite impressive, though be prepared to invest a bit more to really unleash his potential. If you're looking for something similar but a touch less effective, Phantom Golden Freddy has you covered. Lastly, let's give a shout out to Endo 03. After his recent buff, he's become pretty viable with solid single target DPS and a placement count of 4. Trust me, he can really help you tighten up your strategy. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Scott, Phantom Balloon Boy, War Machine Foxy, Blind Eye Foxy, Lulbit, Endo 04, Rave Demon Bonnie, and Funtime Freddy. Alright, let's dive into some of the absolute best mid-game units in Five Nights TD. These characters can seriously turn the tide of battle and help you dominate those pesky enemies. First up, we've got Scott. This guy is a beast. With insane damage output, splash effects, and an impressive range, he's designed to solo carry your team. Trust me, once you get him, you can almost sit back and watch the chaos unfold. Plus, with 6 upgrade levels, he only gets better. If you're looking for a reliable unit to get you through the mid-game, Scott is your go-to. Now, let's talk about Phantom Balloon Boy. This unit has massive damage and a fantastic area of effect that can clear out swarms of enemies. However, be warned, the upgrade costs are pretty steep, so you'll want to manage your resources carefully. Still, if you can afford it, he's a solid pick that packs a punch. On the other hand, we have War Machine Foxy, who's just perfect for those quick placements. With high stats and a low placement count, you can get him in play and upgraded in no time. This means you can transition to your more expensive units much earlier, which is a game changer in those crucial mid-game moments. Last but certainly not least is Funtime Freddy. If you're after epic DPS, look no further. His splash attack has a great radius, and his overall damage output is fantastic. The only downside, he does come with a relatively high placement and upgrade cost. But honestly, the trade-off is worth it when you see those enemies get wiped out. So whether you're stacking up on Scott, utilizing Phantom Balloon Boy's AoE, or unleashing Funtime Freddy's explosive DPS, these mid-game units are sure to make your gameplay a blast. Happy defending! The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Animdude, Galleon Foxy, Circuit Breaker Freddy, Mendo, Bounty Mangle, and Flame Empress Chica. Alright folks, let's dive into the S+ tier mid-game units that can totally transform your strategy in Five Nights Tower Defense. First up is Animdude. Now I know what you're thinking, he's a massive upgrade over Scott, but here's the catch. His upgrades don't come cheap. Seriously, those resource costs can be a bit daunting. especially when you're eyeing other evolutions. But if you're willing to invest, Animdude can really hold his own on the battlefield, bringing some serious firepower to your team. Next on the list is Galleon Foxy, and let me tell you, he is an absolute beast. Not only does he dish out some of the highest damage among mid-game units, but his splash attack also slows enemies down. Imagine a line of foes trudging forward only to be slowed down by Galleon Foxy while your other units take them out. It's a game changer. Speaking of game changers, we can't forget Circuit Breaker Freddy. His single target DPS is off the charts. Sure, his placement cost is a bit on the high side, but trust me, the damage he brings to the table makes it totally worth it, especially when the heat is on. Now, if you're looking for some AoE action, then Bounty Mangle is your go-to unit. This little powerhouse has a massive area of effect attack that deals a ridiculous amount of damage, all while maintaining a low cooldown. Plus, she has a max range of 30 without any multipliers. And let's not forget about the gold farming aspect. Bounty Mangle is practically printing money for your team. Last, but definitely not least, is Flame Empress Chica. She's so overpowered for a mid-game unit that it's almost unfair. With excellent range, a decent cooldown, and splash burn attacks that boost her effective DPS, Empress Chica is the total package. So, if you haven't already, make sure to snag these units and watch your enemies crumble. Finally, let's move on to the best units for late game and support. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Music Man, Fredbear, Spring Bonnie, Ballora, Maestro Puppet, Plush Trap, Hawaii Endo 02, Endo, The Crying Child, Amalgam, and Fazcad. Alright, let's dive into some of the most interesting support units in Five Nights Tower Defense. First up, we have Music Man. This guy is a total game changer with his ability to reduce the cooldowns of nearby units. Imagine having your debuffing units applying pressure even more frequently. It's super helpful, especially during those intense endless runs where you need all the cooldown reduction you can get. Then there's Fredbear, who pretty much outshines Hawaii Endo 02. Not only does he give a nice range boost, but you can also deploy one extra Fredbear, making your strategy even more versatile. He's definitely a must-have in any support lineup. Next, let's talk about Spring Bonnie. Think of him as a beefed-up version of Endo, solid for endless runs, and offers great support for your damage dealers. And if you're into units that help your team stay alive longer, you can't overlook Ballora. While her stats are on par with Music Man, her cooldown reduction is just a tad weaker. Still, she's a reliable option. And we can't forget about Maestro Puppet, who comes in almost as strong as Fredbear, but with easier accessibility. Plus, Plush Trap is another fantastic range buffer that can fit seamlessly into your meta support strategy. You really can't go wrong with any of these. Now, if you're looking for some high-impact slowing units, the Crying Child is your best bet. He's like Amalgam, but on steroids, slowing enemies down by a whopping 50%. With the ability to place two of them, you can really dominate in endless mode. On the flip side, we have Amalgam, who sadly falls short. Sure, he offers a slow effect, but honestly, having extra DPS is just way more beneficial. And let's not even get started on Fazcad, the first money-farming unit that's utterly useless in any game mode. Some might say it's the worst unit on this tier list. So, when you're planning your strategy, make sure to focus on those strong support units while avoiding the duds. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Phantom Chica, Phantom Freddy, Shadow Freddy, Mangle, and Puppet. Alright folks, let's dive into the D-tier endgame units in Five Nights Tower Defense. Trust me, you're gonna want to pay attention here because these units are not exactly setting the world on fire. First up, we have Phantom Chica. Now, hear me out. When fully upgraded, she's not a complete disaster. I mean, she does have a low cooldown, some decent AoE explosions, and okay damage. Think of her as a slightly better Mangle, but let's be real, she still doesn't hold a candle to other endgame units. If you find yourself using her, just know you could be doing much better. Then there's Phantom Freddy, who, well, let's just say he doesn't impress. With a low placement count, mediocre DPS, and limited range, he feels like a letdown for a 15k unit. Honestly, I think he could use some serious buffs to even think about climbing out of the D tier. And don't get me started on Shadow Freddy. With low total DPS and an AoE range that makes you wonder why he exists, he pales in comparison to units like Shadow Bonnie or Blighted Endo Freddy. Finally, we have the infamous Puppet. Seriously, why has it been rebalanced so many times only to end up in the dumpster? With one of the lowest DPS rates in the game, it's best to steer clear of this one unless you want a real headache. Save your sanity and pick something better. trust me. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Blighted Endo Freddy, Marionette's Puppeteer, Bounded Shadow, Withered Bonnie, Plain Boy, Enforcer Bonnie, and Phantom Puppet. Alright, let's dive into some C-tier units from Five Nights Tower Defense. First up, we have Blighted Endo Freddy. Now, don't get me wrong, this guy is a solid full AoE unit with good range and decent DPS. But here's the kicker. His performance is only slightly better than Marionette, which raises the question, is he really worth the investment? If you're looking for something a bit more reliable, maybe keep Blighted Endo Freddy on the back burner. Speaking of Marionette, let's talk about Marionette's Puppeteer. This little gem is a great option if you're on a budget. When fully upgraded, it boasts impressive AoE DPS, making it a strong contender for those trying to save some in-game currency. The only downside? Its range is a bit on the lower side. But hey, if you can position it well, it can definitely hold its own. Then we have Withered Bonnie. She's basically a long-range version of Shadow Freddy. While her stats are not the greatest compared to other endgame units, her price is relatively low, making her a solid choice for those who don't want to break the bank. Just keep in mind, her single target focus means you'll need to be strategic with her placement. Oh, and let's not forget about Plain Boy and Enforcer Bonnie. Both have their ups and downs, but I'd say if you're looking for the best bang for your buck, you might want to explore other options first. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Shadow Bonnie, Phantom Mangle, Leviathan Mangle, Wraith Freddy, Tuned Mangle, Spectral Chica, Abyssal Foxy, Tangle, and Nightmare. Alright, let's dive into some of the B-tier endgame units in Five Nights Tower Defense. These guys may not be the absolute top dogs, but they've got some unique perks that can definitely shake things up in your gameplay. First up, we've got Shadow Bonnie. Think of him as a beefed-up version of Blighted Endo Freddy. He boasts almost 50% more power, which is pretty impressive. However, he does have a shorter range, so you'll want to position him wisely. Just keep in mind that his high cost might be a bit daunting at first, but trust me, once you hit Endless Mode, he can really shine. Then there's Phantom Mangle, who excels in single-target DPS. While he's decent, he still can't quite compete with heavy hitters like Valkyrie Chica. And don't sleep on Leviathan Mangle. This guy is a solid Pierce unit, perfect for tackling multiple enemies. Plus, his single target damage isn't too shabby either, making him a reliable choice in tight situations. Now, let's talk about Wraith Freddy. This dude is a full AoE unit, and his DPS matches that of Withered Endo Freddy, plus you get one extra placement. However, his range is on the shorter side, so it's all about finding the right spot for him. Moving on to Tuned Mangle, who offers a slight upgrade over regular Mangle, but isn't breaking any game mechanics with his performance. Still, that big splash AoE can be a game changer in the right hands. And we can't forget Spectral Chica, who completely outshines Phantom Chica with her impressive DPS and range. Definitely a unit to consider for your strategy. Lastly, there's Abyssal Foxy, whose slow effect makes him somewhat useful. But if you're after pure DPS, you might want to look elsewhere. So there you have it. These B-tier units might not be the strongest, but with the right strategy, they can definitely hold their own. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Master Puppeteer, Nightmare Mangle, Springtrap, Valkyrie Chica, Endo05, Fractured Bonnie, Gunslinger Endo, Nightmare Bonnie, and Circus Baby. Alright, let's dive into the A-tier endgame units in Five Nights Tower Defense. First up, we have the Master Puppeteer. Now don't let those initial stats fool you. This unit packs a serious punch. Its attacks inflict a damage over time effect, multiplying its damage per second tenfold. Talk about turning the tables on your enemies. If you're looking for a solid all-rounder, Master Puppeteer is definitely worth considering for your lineup. Next, let's chat about Nightmare Mangle. This unit boasts a massive AoE attack along with poison capabilities and solid damage output, making it a fearsome addition to your team. The only drawback, it has a low range. But fear not, you can boost its range with the right supports and enchants, so don't hesitate to get creative. And if you want to deal with hordes of enemies while still maintaining strong DPS, Nightmare Mangle is your go-to unit. Now for those of you who love single-target DPS, you can't go wrong with Gunslinger Endo or Nightmare Bonnie. Both units are champions in their own right. Gunslinger Endo is incredibly affordable when it comes to upgrades, making it a fantastic choice even in the mid-game. Nightmare Bonnie, on the other hand, has some of the highest single-target DPS in the game, but you'll definitely need some support to enhance her range. So, gear up, strategize, and let these units help you dominate your tower defense adventures. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Nautic Crusher Mangle, Agonized Springtrap, Limitless Shadow, It's Me, Outlaw Freddy, Glitched Puppeteer, Bomber Boy, Reactor Freddy, and Hydra Mangle. Alright folks, let's dive into the heart of Five Nights Tower Defense and talk about some of the most overpowered S-tier endgame units that you absolutely need in your arsenal. First up, we've got the Nautic Crusher Mangle. This unit is like the upgraded version of the Leviathan Mangle, but on steroids. With a higher DPS, extended range, and more placements, it can absolutely obliterate your foes. Just keep in mind, crafting this beast requires a ton of materials, so get ready to spend some serious hours farming. But trust me, it's totally worth it. Next, let's talk about the Agonized Springtrap. This guy is one of the best evolutions in the game, boasting a piercing attack and incredible DPS. However, you might find that Fractured Bonnie has a slight edge when it comes to taking down single targets. Still, if you're facing hordes of enemies, Agonized Springtrap will make them regret ever stepping onto your turf. And don't overlook the Limitless Shadow. This unit is straight up insane. With a cone AoE attack that dishes out 10k damage when fully upgraded and a relatively short SPA, it's a game changer. Just watch out for its low range. You want to make sure it's placed right. Now, if you're looking for sheer efficiency, you can't go wrong with It's Me. Think of it as a better version of Rave Demon Bonnie, but with only one placement, making it a money-saving powerhouse. And speaking of power, Outlaw Freddy combines the DPS of a continuous unit with a splash attack and excellent range. It's a total game changer. Rounding out our S-tier lineup, we have the Glitched Puppeteer, which is a late-game version of Scott, boasting some of the highest DPS and an amazing range with a 3-placement limit. And don't forget about Bomber Boy. While crafting him is a grind, his DPS and splash radius can be game-breaking. Last but not least, we have Reactor Freddy, similar to Astral Bonnie, but with slightly lower stats. Still a fantastic choice. And let's not skip the Hydra Mangle, which rains napalm down on enemies at an absurd rate while applying burn on hit. Trust me, you want these units on your side if you're looking to dominate. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Astral Bonnie, Valkyrie Prime, RWQFSFASXC, Goliath Endo Freddy, and Night Marion. Alright folks, let's dive into some of the absolute best S+ tier endgame units in Five Nights Tower Defense. These are the powerhouses you definitely want on your team. First up, we have Astral Bonnie. This unit is a game changer. With her insane DPS and unparalleled utility, she excels as a continuous splash and slow unit. Plus, she's the only Apex rarity unit in the game, which means she's a bit of a pricey investment. But trust me, when you see her in action, you'll realize every coin spent is totally worth it. If you're looking for that edge to dominate the competition, Astral Bonnie is your go-to. Next, let's talk about RWQFSFASXC, or Shadow Bonnie's Mega OP counterpart. This unit's damage is just outrageous. It's hard to even describe how broken her stats are. When you throw her into the mix, you can really feel the difference. And speaking of feeling the difference, we can't forget about Goliath Endo Freddy. Sure, his placement cost is high, but his range and AoE damage are insane. He boasts one of the highest base damage numbers in the entire game, making him simply unstoppable. But if you think that's it, we have Night Marion, who may have slightly lower DPS than GEF, but her range, absolutely broken. Depending on the map, she can even outshine GEF. So, whether you're splashing enemies or dealing single target destruction, these units will have you covered. Get ready to crush those waves. The video ends here. See you in another video. Don't forget to subscribe.